absolutely terrifying experience that I can't explain and had to share. And it was a typical Friday night. My parents were out to dinner with friends, and I was home alone, binge watching some horror movies on Netflix. I was eating my microwave pizza and drinking my soda when I started to hear a faint tapping sound. It was rhythmic and persistent, almost like someone tapping to a beat. I paused the movie and tried to pinpoint where the sound was coming from. As I listened closely, I could tell it was coming from upstairs. Thinking it had to be some sort of logical explanation, I decided to investigate and started heading up the stairs. When I got to the top landing, the tapping grew much louder, and if I'm being completely honest, I was pretty scared. As I kept listening, I realized that the sound was coming from my parents' bedroom. When I finally had enough courage, I pushed open my parents' door and saw what was causing the noise. The window in their room was slightly open, and the wind was causing a curtain to tap against the glass. I let out a nervous laugh, relieved that there was a logical explanation. But as I was about to close the window, I noticed something strange in the reflection of the glass. In the dim light of the hallway, I saw a shadowy figure standing behind me. I turned around in horror, but there was nothing there. The hallway was empty and quiet. I tried like crazy to convince myself that it was my imagination and that I was just seeing things. I closed the window and turned to leave, but that's when I heard the softest voice whisper my name from the hallway. My legs felt like jello, but I slowly walked over to the hallway. I peeked my head out and saw this shadowy figure at the edge of my steps. It seemed to look at me, and then in an instant, it was gone. And I screamed so loud, I'm surprised my neighbors didn't call the cops. I was so terrified that I rushed into my bedroom and locked the door. I was so scared that I stayed locked in there until my parents came home. When I told my parents about it, they seriously thought I was having some kind of mental breakdown. But I know what I saw was real that night. It honestly was a nightmarish experience that I still can't explain to this day. If you ever experience something like this, take my advice. Get out of there and call for help immediately. This happened back in 2019. It was a really quiet evening, and my parents had gone out of town for a weekend getaway up in the Pocono Mountains. And I was home alone, and I decided to make the most of it by catching up on some TV shows that my parents wouldn't approve of if they were there. And I was in our front living room, watching my shows and scrolling on my phone, when, out of nowhere, I started to hear these voices. They weren't coming from my TV. They seemed to be coming from behind me, and they sounded distant. I muted my show and stood up. The voices I was hearing were low, but it sounded like they were having a conversation with each other. And I've stayed home alone plenty of times, and I never scared easily, but hearing these voices really freaked me the hell out. I went around the house to see if another TV or iPad was playing, but nothing was. As I entered my kitchen, that's when I heard the voices even louder. I realized that it was coming from behind my basement door. And I opened it, and it was pitch black down there. Now the voices were super loud, but I couldn't quite make out what they were saying. It sounded like two men were talking to each other. Like a dumbass, I grabbed a steak knife and my cell phone and started heading into the basement. I flicked on the light, which wasn't that bright, and also turned on my flashlight on my phone. And I seriously was expecting some kind of evil clown or monster to jump out of the shadows at any second. When I got to the bottom, I shone my light in the direction the voices were coming from. I was dumbfounded. In the back corner of our basement on a shelf was this old radio my dad had. It was super old, had been down here for years, and to my knowledge, it had never worked. But the radio was on, and it was playing what sounded like an old radio broadcast. And I tried to turn it off, but the power button was jammed, and the volume knob wouldn't budge. I shook it, and it still wouldn't turn off. In frustration, I threw the radio against the wall, and it shattered. I had no idea how that radio had turned itself on, or why it had started playing an old broadcast, but standing down there all alone gave me goosebumps, so I ran back upstairs and shut the basement door. Now get this, when I get back into the living room, I noticed that my front door was wide open. Cold air was blowing in, and it was definitely locked and shut when I went into the basement. I called my parents, freaking out. My uncle, who lived a half-hour away, came to stay with me the rest of the weekend. This was one of those experiences that I'll never be able to get over. I have no idea how that old radio started playing and how my front door was just wide open. Has anyone else had a similar encounter while being home alone? Thanks for listening. I recently moved into a new apartment out in downtown Philadelphia. It's a cozy little one-bedroom apartment in an older building. When I first moved in, everything seemed normal, no weird vibes or anything like that. But only after 1 week of being there, something really strange happened. I was in the kitchen and making myself some dinner. In one of the drawers, I found a folded piece of paper. It looked really old, kind of yellowed, and had a strange symbol drawn on it that I couldn't identify. At first, I figured it was just some trash left behind, but curiosity got the best of me. I unfolded the paper and saw there was a short message written on it. It said, "You're not alone." My first thoughts were it could be some prank by the previous tenant or just a random note left behind. But here's the creepy part. I asked the landlord about the previous tenant, and he said the apartment had been vacant for months before I moved in. Naturally, I've been a little paranoid ever since. I double-checked all the locks, made sure all the windows were secure, and even looked for hidden cameras, but I found nothing. The weirdest part is that I've had this constant feeling of being watched ever since I found that note. I'll be doing something in the apartment and turn around quickly because I can seriously feel eyes watching me. I've only been here a few months and I'm already considering moving out. Then, just the other day as I was folding laundry, I got a text from some random number. All it said was, "You're not alone." Recently, I've went around to all my other neighbors in my building and asked them if they've been experiencing anything strange or unusual. None of them have. I don't want to seem like the crazy new person who's moved in, but I seriously can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched, and I can't explain that weird text message and note. I've also recently been digging deep into the history of this building, but so far I haven't found anything alarming. Should I be worried, or am I just letting my imagination run wild? If these weird things continue, I will be moving out. I'll keep you updated. Thanks for listening.